Hey San Diego, welcome back to episode 50 of The Apartment Geek. I'm your host, Chris Robinson. We've got some interesting topics to talk about today. I'm excited about them. Things that have kind of come up and, current environment, important things that I want to hopefully add insight and help owners, landlords navigate the different waters that we're in right now. There's still uncertainty out there, and I'm kind of Mr. Positive, and I always try to not be ignorant about things, but as I've talked about, kind of look at the glass half full and stay optimistic, again, without being the ostrich with his head in the sand. So the first one that keeps coming up with clients that I've talked to, owners in San Diego, is how do I handle late tenants? Now, the good news about this whole topic is what we are seeing is very good collection. So, call it 95%, low to mid 90s as far as collections. This is for as late as August. So that's the good news. Now, the bad news is there's select tenants at properties who are basically playing us, taking advantage of the situation, claiming, hardship, which is fine, but they're not making any progress payments. They're not communicating, and they're just being pretty low level as far as how the tenant is handling the situation. Some people are communicating and doing it, some aren't. So how do we deal with those tenants who are just blatantly living at your property for free? Now, it looks like, and this could change, it looks like we can actually start a legal eviction September 2nd. So right around the corner, literally next week. Now, the issue is, for people that have been in the business a long time, is evictions suck, for lack of better words. It's brain damage, it's paperwork, it's a lot of money. You're probably never going to get the money back on a judgment. I've had evictions, and I don't think I've ever seen a penny from monies owed. So what's the alternative? And the courts are going to be super backed up. So it's just going to be a crappy experience to go this legal route. That may have to happen. I'm not saying that's not okay. My first option is to try to have a heart-to-heart with the tenant. And again, easier said than done. And this will kind of you can practice your people skills at this point, or your manager. But I would almost do it as the owner, the actual owner of the real estate. See if you can contact that person on the phone, maybe even go out to the property and knock on the door and just say, hey, Joe or Mary, whatever the name is, this is a crappy situation for everybody. You seem to be in a difficult place because you haven't paid. We're in a difficult place. It really messes with our accounting and our bills and paying the mortgage and keeping the property up nice. Why don't we make a deal? It's a win-win. And if you can move out in X amount of days, 5 or 7 or 10 days, we make a deal. I'll give you some money to move. And guess what? This is the biggest part about it. I will wash your balance clean, or I guess wipe what you owe clean, or that hole that they're in. And they basically won't have to owe you anything. You just want them out. And I'll talk about that in a second. You want them out so you can go rent to a new paying tenant, right? You're providing a service and you're not getting paid for that service, period. And I think and I don't know if I'm just being, speaking to hopefully, hopeful wishing or whatever that's called, wishful hope, you know what I mean. But try to have a heart to heart and make a deal with them and say, move out, here's some money. You won't have to pay the 5, 6, 7 grand that you owe me, because guess what? Chances are they're not going to get out of that hole. And tenants are fairly short. Most tenants, I don't want to put everyone in the same boat, but most are fairly short-sighted. And if there's a big balance, that's going to be really hard for them to get out of. So the intelligent thing for them to do is to make a deal with you and say, okay, I'll be out in 10 days. I'm going to go find a more affordable place to live. You give them $500 to help move. Make a deal, if possible. That's going to be a better route than going the legal eviction route. Now, there's a couple tenants where we have to go legal because we've tried that, and they're still not. They're basically not being responsive at all with showing up in person, emails, putting letters on the door of the unit. And I have a template. If anybody wants a letter, kind of a heart-to-heart letter to put on the door, reach out, and I'm happy to share what I've tried to use. It has not worked, but I think it's a better thing to try before you go right to the eviction attorney. The next topic that I thought was interesting, and this stems from an owner I spoke with, an esteemed local person who was out. I talked to him, and he was out at his property, and this is a passive owner, planting flowers in the front of his apartment complex. I think it was like an 18-unit apartment building. And I was so surprised because this person is out of town a lot. He's traveling. He's a very passive owner. He has a management company, and he was down there planting flowers. And I just go, that's interesting. And he said, I want to show these tenants that I care and I have a sense of pride in the property. And it got me to think about how I think a lot of us don't go to our buildings that much. Maybe we do a quick drive-by. I tend to stay, at definitely arm's length from tenant communication and such, but this is a great time to be extra involved and to go drive by your buildings, get out, do a walk around. Don't go down there in the fancy car or the nice clothes, but just go understated in a good attitude and a friendly attitude about the mindset that you care about your property and you're going to do a little walk around. And the negative to this, or the backlash, is a lot of times when you do this, tenants come out of the woodwork and they have a laundry list of things that they want fixed or dealt with in their unit. Or my carpet's crappy, or there's my laminate floor is coming up, or whatever it may be. So there's a couple options. You could say, put a list together and send it to the manager. And I think I think spending a little bit of money, if that does happen, where you go down there and you're kind of involved and you make yourself seen, if you have to go spend $500 or $1,000 to do little things for tenants, I think it's going to be a sign of goodwill that's going to go a lot further, and those tenants will act. It'll be a lot easier for those tenants to actually try to make their rent payment and not take advantage of the situation. And if they are in a hardship from the COVID thing, then at least they'll communicate. They'll make installment payments, because most people can make some money here. They'll give you $500, $1,000 at a time, etc. And that's okay with me. I work with people who are respectful and they communicate, period. So if you go down there and you walk around and maybe people see you, or maybe the neighbors mentioned to the other neighbors that the landlord was walking around, whatever it may be, they know that somebody's involved and there's a sense of pride and involvement. And I think consciously or subconsciously, that will mitigate tenants playing you or taking advantage of the situation. So an idea, getting involved, getting more involved, talking to the managers more, going and meeting your on-site, really kind of taking this as an opportunity to, intimately be part of the management and operation of the buildings. Some really smart owners, huge owners, thousands of units owners, did this a lot in the last recession in 2008, 9, 10, when vacancy was a little higher, effective rents went down a little bit, and the really, really big, super wealthy people were driving around and going on site and getting very involved and kind of getting their hands dirty with their different properties. And I just remember hearing about that. This is, a decade ago. Last thing that I thought was something that I see a lot of is the negativity. And Jerry Rollins, who leads a peer group that I'm in, it's called SAGE. It's like an executive roundtable group. He did an email this last week, and it kind of inspired me to talk about this more. It was about positivity, and it was about being positive without being over positive, which comes across as fake and bullshit, and people probably resent that. And I don't want to be in that bucket. I just try to be aware and alert, but optimistic. So what I'm calling this, and I kind of like this, I'm calling it getting, staying aware and alert versus getting in the weeds. And there's a lot of talk about the stuff that's going on the ballot, Proposition 15 and 21. I know a lot about these things, but rather than getting in the weeds and letting it kind of bring down my whole day, I'm staying aware, I'm staying alert, I'm making wise decisions right now with regards to my rent roll and remodeling units, and trying to get any vacant unit remodeled and at a really high, well, as high as I can, market rent, foundation rent. Thinking about raising rents at some point. Now that may sound foolish or like a bad guy thing to do or a mean thing to do, but at some point a lot of these tenants are working, and at some point rents are going to go up. And with vacancy control that crazy California wants to pass, it's going to be real important for you to have the highest baseline rent roll rents as possible when any of these things go into effect. The vacancy control is an issue. So what I see, and I'm trying to make this people aware, is they get so caught up in the negativity and the bullshit and, oh my gosh, this is going to be horrible and the market's going to go to crap and this and that they kind of lose track of, well, what do I own and what decisions am I going to make to kind of offset these potential very negative things that may happen. So we want to write to our local leaders, or lack of leadership, but people who have authority, I should say. We want to voice our opinions. We want to sign the petitions. I've got a bunch of stuff that I sign and I fill out that's opposing this stuff. You vote against it, etc. You spread the word. That's all fine, but there's a difference between that and then getting in the weeds where it really lets us get down, and our psyche suffers from that. And frankly, I think you lose touch with making smart, wise, creative, that's a good word, decisions in the moment. And that's pertaining to your business model and the buildings, the properties that you own, and how you're kind of moving forward. Personally, I think it's still a great time to buy real estate. As crazy as that sounds, long term, this is a long-term game, and essential living, roof over your head, is not going away. So I talked about that last week. If something comes across your radar and the fundamentals, most of that makes sense, then buy it and continue growing or expanding, because the long-term picture I still think is going to be very promising. Even if some of these measures get passed, it's going to make it more difficult, but this is still essential business stuff that we're dealing with. So negativity versus wise decisions and moving forward. Those three categories I thought were just current, and I want to offer myself to people that want to talk in more depth or grab a coffee. I've been really enjoying, after 5 months of silence, meeting people and having a coffee, or I'm drinking more tea now, green tea, but just sitting and kind of talking about life and deeper business, really deeper business in life. So let me know if you want to do that. I would love that. And until then, I'm still working on the ebook, and I'm making really good progress with it. So at some point that's going to be ready to get out there. And as a reminder, that's a big tool for business people who are hustling, who care about building passive income so that at some point they can go to the mountains or the beach or go skiing with their families, etc. And they have annuity, they have cash flow coming in without the transactional grind and the brain damage of making widgets in the factory over and over and over. So thanks for tuning in. Have a great one, and I hope to see you soon. Bye.